This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
Place to Be Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Movie Review of the Day here on the Pop Experience. I am Steve Riddle, back again for another go round, and today we are continuing with our theme week this week, where we are looking at remakes. Of course, there have been many remakes over the years, some great, some not so great. Obviously, this will be the first time that we cover this topic. We will be doing it obviously down the line, some other point down the line. And for today's episode, I'm going to go kind of more recently, and talk about a film that came out about 16 years ago, and one that I haven't watched in a while. Until I do remember watching it in theaters, and I watched it obviously for this pod, and it's one of those ones that I kind of forgot about, but one that I think actually still holds up pretty well even 16 years later. The film I'm talking about today is True Grit. This came out on December 22nd, 2010. Budget $35 to $38 million. Box office $252.3 million. So very, very successful film. Starring Jeff Bridges, Hailee Steinfeld, Matt Damon, Josh Brolin, Barry Pepper, Domhnall Gleeson, among others. It, of course, is based off the 1968 novel of the same name, where a young girl hires a U.S. Marshal to assist her in finding the man who murdered her father. They are also accompanied by a Texas Ranger who also looks to capture the same man, and this film kind of goes through their journey. Of course, like I said, it is a remake. The original was done in 1969. That version, of course, starring John Wayne. And as well as Glenn Campbell and Kim Darby, so we do have so there is that. As I normally do, I will of course start off here with the three things that worked and three things that didn't work. So the three things that worked. Number one, there isn't again much difference between this film and the original. It does play out most of the same way. If you want to kind of watch them back to back. I've actually not watched the original 69 version. I'm sure it's floating out there somewhere. And it is kind of again, they do go kind of step for step most of the way. Even with some of the majority of the dialogue there. Of course, one of the iconic quotes from the original is John Wayne shouting out, "Feel your hand, you son of a bitch," as he fights off Pepper and his gang, and they do the same thing here with Jeff Bridges doing the same thing. The only difference here is that the Coens, who of course directed the film, kind of want to put this version, kind of focusing more on the point of Maddie, played by Hailee Steinfeld, and you can definitely see that throughout the film that a lot of the focus is on her, and which makes sense because this is kind of her. This is basically her story. Her father was killed, and she's trying to avenge his death. And even though it's still kind of more from her point of view, they did do a good job at kind of making the two films still kind of making the two films feel very similar. So I thought that was well done. Number two, the relationship between our three main characters. Rooster, Maddie, and LeBoo, as I think is the name pronounced, is quite interesting because obviously Rooster is basically a drunkard, and he's very kind of full of himself, and LeBoo is kind of more level-headed and everything, and then you got Maddie kind of wanted to kind of bring everything together so that, because again, all she cares about is, finding the man who killed her father, and obviously, and LeBou, like I said, also has a stake in this because he wants Cheney, the man that killed Maddie's father, because he had killed a state senator. He wants to bring Cheney back to Texas for justice, whereas Maddie wants Cheney for herself, in essence. So, seeing these three kind of butt heads for the most part, and a couple of times kind of part ways, eventually coming to the end where they do end up coming together to take out Cheney, as well as Pepper and his gang. I thought was really good, and by the end of it, you can see how much Rooster has come to care for Maddie. That after she gets her hand bit by the rattlesnake, he takes her all the way to the shelter and is able to get her to a point where she can survive, although she does lose her arm at the end of it. But again, that's just that the journey they kind of take. I thought was pretty well done. And then number 3, the shootouts I thought were really well done, particularly the one at the end there where Rooster charges in, 4-on-1, but he's able to take out a couple of the gang members. But you think he's going to get killed by Pepper, but LeBou is able to kill him with a 400-yard shot. So again, kind of a good little end there. And then Maddie does end up getting the last word on Cheney by killing him, even though it causes her to get knocked into that snake pit and get bit. But she does get her justice there, and she's able to avenge her father there at the end. So I thought that was pretty well done as well. So. Now we'll go to the 3 things that didn't work. And number 1, even though this film is not shy of 2 hours, it does feel like it drags a little bit, especially in the beginning where we see Maddie kind of trying to raise the money to hire Rooster, and it just feels kind of unnecessary. I think I know if anything, at least they kind of did it here in the beginning. But I think, it could have been a little bit better to get right to the point and then, kind of get to the point where Maddie does end up bringing Rooster on. So, again, just one of those things where it's like, we get what the point you're trying to make here, but I think they could have done a little bit better in expediting it, in my opinion. Number 2, for a Western, there isn't as much shootouts as I thought there would be. We do get a couple throughout the course of the film, and then, like I said, the big showdown at the end. But when you think of Westerns, you think of these all these different shootouts. But I feel like there weren't that many in this film, which I kind of was a little bit disappointed with. I was kind of hoping for something a little more in that aspect. So again, maybe instead of like early on where setting up of everything, maybe they could have used that to throw a little bit more action in the middle there, which I thought could have maybe made the film a little bit more exciting. And it does, again, just my opinion. And then number 3, I don't like the way they kind of ended the film here. Obviously, this is kind of where this film differs from the original. Now, in the original, LeBou actually dies after they pull Maddie out of the snake pit. He ends up being left behind, just like he's left behind in both films, but unlike in this one where it's assumed that that he survived and has moved on. In the original, he dies from his injuries, and then Rooster kind of stays with Maddie until he knows that she's okay, and then he then brings her back home, and then he rides off into the sunset. And that's in the original. In this version, we find out that he had been part of a traveling Wild West show, and he invited Maddie to a show when it's nearby, which she does. She takes up the offer, and this is where we find out she had lost her arm. But then she finds out that Rooster had died 3 days prior, and she ends up bringing him back to her family cemetery. And then she also mentions that she had no idea what happened to LeBou. So You know, I don't know. Maybe a little bit more. Again, I think this is more part of the Coens making it more about Maddie. Hence, why we find out what happened to her, and it's more the ending's more focused on her as opposed to Rooster or the Boo. But it would have been nice to see an adult Maddie kind of see Rooster one more time. Maybe there would have been a little bit of more of a happy ending there. So again, just minor nitpick there. So now we'll go to my awards. My MVP of the film easily is going to be Hailee Steinfeld, who plays Banny. She actually had this was actually kind of her first big film in terms of a major film. She had done a couple of short films prior, and even a TV film. But in terms of full length films, this was her first, and this was quite the role to fill. She had only I believe she was so she was born in 96, so she was actually 14 when the film was made. So it ended up so kind of played out the fact that she was actually considering the character Maddie was 14, and that she was actually 14 when it was filmed. I thought that was a good little kind of good tie-in, and she brought it. I mean, for such a big role, she really killed it, and gone on to have a pretty obviously very good career since. So I will definitely give that to her. And I'll also say she is my favorite character, is Maddie. She's definitely very hard-headed and stubborn, and you can understand why. I mean, she saw her father be killed, and she wants justice for him. And there's actually a point there where she's been told that that stubbornness is going to may cost her in the end, and actually ended up costing her her arm, even though she did get what she wanted. So just kind of seeing her be a part of this journey, and to kind of be the buffer between Rooster and the Boo, I thought was really well done. My least favorite character, I wasn't a big fan of the Boo, who's portrayed by Matt Damon. He's kind of he's definitely one that's, I mean, as a Texas Ranger, he's he has his certain way of doing things, and it clearly coincides or clashes with Rooster, and I think he's definitely he takes a lot longer to warm up to Maddie than Rooster does, because I think Rooster kind of sees a little bit of himself in Maddie, and there was that one point where Rooster tries to save him, but inadvertently shoots him, although he does try to deny it. And you can see, the Boo's definitely kind of an asshole to him about it, which, I mean, for good reason. He did get shot, but I don't know. I didn't connect with the Boo as much as I probably, would have liked to have. My favorite scene, there's a couple of good ones. Like I said, the final shooting at the end, but the one where they're kind of walking, where they're post having saved the Boo, and they're continuing on, and they're kind of, the Boo and Rooster are arguing about what happened, and the Boo's basically saying Rooster shot him, and the Boo and Rooster's trying to deny it. They go through this little shootout with first Rooster tries to shoot the bottle and he misses it, and then he eventually shoots it on the ground. And the Boo actually says, I think my favorite line in the film, he's like, "I thought you were going to say the sun was in your eyes, or in this case, your eye," because for those that, if you've never seen the film, Rooster has only has one eye because he has a patch over his I think it's his right eye, and then they get into a kind of a constant shootout with shooting cornbread, and it was for a film that doesn't have a lot of comedy in it, that was kind of a little bit of a comedic scene to make to kind of keep things moving. So that would probably be my favorite scene. And then overall final grade, I thought this was a really well done film. My little nitpicks aside, I think this was a pretty great Western. I think they did the original justice. I mean, obviously, it's hard to compare John Wayne to Jeff Bridges, but I thought Bridges really did a good job as Rooster. And then, like I said, coupled with Damon and Steinfeld, and I didn't talk about him much, but Josh Brolin as Cheney, even though we don't see him until the end, I thought he did a really good job as well. portraying that character. Josh Brolin's good at these, kind of these villain characters. Like we saw him as what was his name? It was a No Country for Old Men, as Anton, and then of course, as we know, he would be Thanos. But he kind of in this for such a minor character, he did do a good job with it. So again, I did despite my minor nitpicks, I thought again this was a really great film. It really played to the original, and I'm actually gonna go 9 out of 10. I know this film got a bunch of nominations so it got nominated for 10 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. Got nominated for Best Picture, Director, Adapted Screenplay, Actor, Supporting Actress, Art Direction, Cinematography, Costume Design, Sound Mixing, and Sound Editing. Unfortunately, did not win any of them. So, that was kind of a tough year for it. That was a year that was dominated mainly by The King's Speech, The Fighter, Black Swan, Social Network. So that was, tough year for True Grit. And I think it just kind of got lost in the shuffle. Inception was that year. So, I think any other year, I think it may have had a chance to win one of those awards, but it just kind of just fell into the wrong year for it. But yeah, 9 out of 10 for me on this one. I think in terms of remakes, it's definitely one of the best ones. But with that, that's going to do it for me. Thank you again for listening. Thank you for continuing to support us. We're closing in on episode 100. In fact, I believe Friday, May 22nd will be our 100th episode already. So, we've been churning these along since we started earlier in the year, and we're going to continue doing so because we got a lot of great theme weeks coming for the summer, which I'm looking forward to. So, be on the lookout for that and continue to follow along and support us. We definitely appreciate all the love. So, with that, I am Steve Riddle. This has been the movie review of the day here on the Pop Experience, and we'll see you next time.